We dramatically changed in the last 75 years the way we live in every way.
As the industrialized lifestyle spreads around the globe, we see Western diseases spreading as well.
The epidemics of chronic non-infectious diseases, hypertension, fatty liver disease,
obesity,
Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's,
heart disease,
anxiety and depression,
diabetes,
autoimmune diseases, cancer, they all have moved to younger and younger age groups with their onset. Surprisingly, the science has really shown that they're all connected. The best way to explain the connection is that they have to do with gut health.
all come from our desire to chase foods, to produce them in quantities that vastly outstrip what nature ever provided for us over our evolutionary history. Today, we have the ability to produce the things we crave the most in whatever quantities we desire.
The modern industrialized world is destroying our gut microbiome.
Our gut microbes are actually central to many components of our health. They're sending chemicals into our bloodstream and impacting our immune system in our lungs, impacting our central nervous system. And if you start tinkering with this community, you start changing biology all over your body.
All these bacteria are missing and it's causing disease.
This is unsustainable. If we are to survive as a species, this must change. The good news is we can actually heal our gut. But first, we need to understand what we are facing. I'm Dr. Emmeron Meyer, leading gut health expert and the executive director of the Oppenheimer Family Center for Neurobiology of Stress at UCLA.
I'm Dr. Erica Sonnenberg.
And I'm Dr. Justin Sonnenberg.
We are Stanford-based microbiologists, immunologists, and authors.
I'm David Zilber, chef, fermentation expert, and the former head of fermentation at NOMA, and this is Gut Health on Masterclass.
This class is a comprehensive examination of the role that the gut plays in everything.
From brain function to hormone regulation to inflammation control and disease prevention.
In this class, you'll learn the latest about the interactions between the brain, the gut, and its microbiome. You will also learn about simple solutions to chronic health problems focused on changing your lifestyles and through those changes, your gut microbiome.
You should eat organic food, or as your grandparents called it, food.
And we will be relearning ancient techniques for feeding your microbial ecosystem.
The practice of fermentation is a great way to better your own health. But this class isn't just about eating right.
It is for anyone who wants to feel good, be well, and age well.
What we're trying to do is really expand the amount of time that we can be healthy, that we can be exercising, that we can be engaged, more so than just tacking on another sick year at the end of our life.
This class is a science-based exploration of the universe inside you and how your gut impacts your mind, your body, and your life.
We may have here a critical node of human health that we just haven't paid enough attention to. Rewriting the rules for how society takes care of our gut microbiome may do a huge amount for combating disease down the road.
To truly understand the importance of gut health, we must start at the beginning, in a world inhabited only by microbes. In the vast expanse of Earth's early history, trillions upon trillions of microorganisms floated aimlessly in the primordial soup. These were the pioneers of life, the first settlers of this ancient planet. Over time, these microbes gradually perfected the ability to communicate with one another. As time passed, the environment became diverse and complex. In this changing world, a resilient multicellular organism known as the Hydra emerged, and that is where our gut biome's story really begins. Microbes seeking stability and nourishment found solace in the Hydra's digestive system. As the Hydra swam through the waters, the microbes thrived on the nutrients derived from the Hydra's diet. In return, it provided the Hydra with valuable assistance in digestion. The two beings flourished together, their partnership becoming more intertwined with each passing generation. Millennia passed, the complexity of life increased and new organisms emerged. Enter humans. Humans provided the perfect environment for countless microbial species to establish resonance, forming what would become known as the human gut microbiome. Humans spread out across the planet, building complex societies and eating diverse diets, but not without our microbial partners. We have people living in the rainforests on the Amazon, in the deserts, totally different food sources, and it's all compatible because our microbes help us to adapt to these environments.
When we hear the term gut, I think a lot of people automatically think of the stomach. The gut includes the esophagus, stomach, the small intestine, and the colon. After food hits your stomach, it goes into your small intestine in this really long stretch of our GI tract, and that's where all the nutrients are absorbed. We have microbes all throughout our digestive tract, but the vast majority of them are at the far reaches of our gut in our colon or our large intestine. We have trillions of microbes, hundreds of species, and it's this really complex ecosystem where you just have many species interacting with one another and processing nutrients that come through. This is the microbiome.
Traditionally, we've always thought bacteria are bad guys, particularly when they come into our body, into our system. Today, we realize that these 100 trillion microbes living in our gut, the majority are benign, and not only benign, but also health promoting. The microbiome, that term basically refers to the bacteria and the microbial organisms and their gene pool. The microbial genes is these 100 millions of genes compared to our 20,000. And these genes encode functions, most of which we don't understand yet.
It turns out that our human genome is really a small percentage of the total genome that we carry around, because humans are a composite organism of human cells and microbial cells. The human cells of our body only encompass about 1% of the total genetic material that we carry around. Our microbiome, that's over 99% of our associated genetic material. Our human genome is fixed at conception. We have the genes that we're going to have. But when a human is born, they're born largely devoid of microbes. They get colonized by microbes upon their birth. So unlike our human genome, we have some control over our microbiome's genome. They pick up microbes from the mother's vagina or her skin if they're born by C-section, the hospital, the people taking care of them. Then when the baby's brought home, as the infant is breastfed or if they're formula fed, that will impact the community of microbes they have. Siblings, pets, other caregivers, they're all providing microbes to this infant.
A way of reframing humans is that we're actually elaborate culturing vessels where our microbes have actually shaped our biology, our behavior, to pass them from one generation to the next.
I've grown up in a very natural environment. I've spent my summer vacations on farms of relatives. I've gone hunting and fishing with my uncle and grandfather almost every evening. So how does this fit into this bigger picture of the history of the microbiome and how we came to this point? I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but I think we have to go back, way back, these hundreds of thousands of years. When humans were living a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the diet we evolved to eat, we evolved in total symbiosis with the microbiome. They had to look for raw fruits and vegetables for their survival. We're really dependent on the microbes for absorption and digestion because we can't absorb many things in a raw plant. Complex carbohydrates are a food that the microbes love, which can come from berries or nuts. There's pecans, then we have pumpkin seeds, then there's the blueberries, a superfood, mainly because they have this high concentration of these anthocyanins, which is a color also of dark blue, black walnuts that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and golden berries. they're richer in vitamin C. In terms of minerals, flax seeds, ground flax seeds, high in fiber. The chia seeds are probably the most fiber-dense type of seed that you can eat. They will stimulate propulsion and secretion in your gut. So it's almost like a natural laxative. The health benefit for your gut health and your gut microbial health is related to the fact that all of them contain either fiber, large molecules that need the microbes to process, or they contain this group of molecules called flavonoids, which are polyphenols or very large molecules that cannot be absorbed in our small intestine, so they all have to go down to the microbes and ask for their help in breaking them down into metabolites. Once processed by the microbes, they end up as anti-inflammatory substances that don't stay in the gut. They're being absorbed and reach every part of our bodies, including the brains. I could almost say that this is taking advantage of the magic and the wisdom of the microbes to translate these plant-based products into health beneficial products for us. A combination of a lot of fresh, raw fruits and vegetables go into this healthy, gut-friendly diet. Diversity and richness is the hallmark of a healthy microbiome. Cooking of food was the first step in developing processed foods. So now all of a sudden the microbiome didn't have to break down raw vegetables and raw leaves and nuts and berries. Another dramatic change was the agricultural revolution, where all of a sudden humans were able to grow food and have farm animals, and so there's fewer sources of food now all of a sudden. The human gut microbiome almost certainly changed at that time. But you add to this also the naturally fermented foods, which have microbes in it. And they were created by this ancient practice that is very important for microbial health and for gut health, which is fermentation.
To a very strict microbiology professor, fermentation is one of two things, two enzymatic pathways that exist in bacteria and yeast. The glycolysis, or breaking apart of sugar for the production of either ethanol, which is alcohol, or lactic acid that happens in the absence of oxygen. That does not encompass fermentation in general practice at all. For thousands of years, people did not need to know the science of how fermentation worked to understand that it was good or that they should keep doing it. It's a great way to preserve food. You know, it was quite obvious that if Hans over there had all of his cabbages fermented in a cellar, safe for the winter, but, you know, Piotr in the other field just left them out, above ground to rot, that Hans would be more successful and probably father more grandchildren at the end of the day. That's evolution for you. And in many ways, fermentation is evolution writ large. We're talking about the relationship between gut health and fermentation, specifically because the microbes that we've often employed throughout human history to transform our foods are the same microbes that live in and on our bodies, and that's no coincidence. So there is a strong link between the foods that we've historically sought to eat and preserve using microbial life and activity, and their impact on our well-being. My first ferment that I ever made, it was an accident. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, at home in Toronto one morning, poured myself a big bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios with whole milk. I kind of unthinkingly just threw the bowl up on the counter. Spent an uneventful day, in kind of early summer at my elementary school, and came home, and the milk in my bowl had set. I asked my mom, "Hey, what's going on here? Why is my milk not milk anymore?" She stuck her finger in and said, "Well, you made yogurt." I recreated something that people had been consuming for thousands of years, from the Balkans to the Himalayas. The bacteria from my own mouth had transferred from the spoon back to the bowl, and by leaving it out on the counter, I'd allowed those bacteria to thrive in the remnants of my breakfast. what we're gonna make first is kind of a recreation of that very happy accident that I had. And it's also a great entry point into the world of the relationship between fermentation and gut health, because, I mean, my own Polish grandmother, using her own kind of folk ancestral knowledge, always knew that if her grandkids had tummy trouble, that once they were through it, the best thing to feed them was a spoonful of yogurt. So here we have a half gallon of milk. Whole milk, it is pasteurized, so it is devoid of microbes, but no worries, we're going to introduce those microbes into the equation. In store-bought yogurt, you'll generally have just a handful of bacteria that are designed to make yogurt very quickly at industrial scale. And that's all well and good, but what you gain in speed, you'll also lose in complexity. And so to me, a homemade ferment is always going to taste more visceral, more real, more alive. In this little jar, you have old yogurt. It contains all sorts of bacteria to make your next batch of yogurt. It's a whole world. Have my pot. Just gonna pour this in. And we're gonna turn on the stove. Over medium heat, we don't wanna scald the milk, and we're gonna bring it up to just below a simmer and allow it to cool back down to just about body temperature, so around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we're gonna introduce the culture. If you add the microbes in while the milk is still quite hot, you'll kill them. If you are doing this for the first time, using a powdered bacterial culture, you just open the packet, which should be pre-portioned to some specific amount of milk, be it 2 quarts or a gallon. You heat your milk up, you allow it to cool down, and once it's cool, you just stir in and dissolve that packet. We're not gonna be using a powdered culture here, we're going to be using the finished yogurt as our back slop. It contains all the bacteria that we need to make more yogurt, and once they're in there, they'll start doing their thing. Well, I'm starting to see wisps of steam come off of the pot right now. I can't hold my pinky inside for more than a second. Definitely starting to bite, so we understand exactly where we are. This is now at 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which to me is perfect. So we're gonna cut the heat. We're gonna use our liquid measure here. So now our milk is cooled down to temperature. Make room for about 10% of this milk's volume in old yogurt. That is going to be enough bacteria to get the batch going. We just give it a good stir, cap it. We're going to just leave it out at room temperature, and in 24 to 36 hours, we will end up with finished yogurt. Here's one we've done up about a day and a half ago. Jiggles when moved. It peels away from the sides of the container as a solid mass, and you get a gorgeous curd. Not so hard, huh? And incredibly delicious. Once you start to taste that sourness build and build, you know it's time to put it into the fridge. You know, all the protein, all the nutrients, all the living bacteria that are in this are the beneficial life forms that humans have been consuming for centuries and seeing positive health outcomes from. Probiotics in the truest sense of the word. We're going to make one of my favorite breakfasts that sees our yogurt act as the canvas for a great array of fruits that basically cover the panoply of the rainbow. Raspberries I'm going to leave whole because they're so soft and juicy, and same with the blueberries. We're also going to go for some fiber, our pre-made granola, pumpkin, and flax. Foods that will help to nourish the microbes that are inside of us, and then for our fruit. Another powerful aspect of making your own ferments. You're connected to them. You want to enjoy them. Happy bowl, happy gut.
The science has really shown that the gut plays a big role in the call homeostasis or balance of our body. And the microbes play a big role in this. The microbes express enzymes or neurotransmitters, and they play a big role in, for example, telling our hormonal cells in the gut to release a hormone that gets to the brain that creates fullness after a meal. So we never would think about this, that it's our bacteria telling the cells in our gut, send a signal to the brain to stop eating. There's others of these neurotransmitters that we have always studied at the brain level, like dopamine, endorphins. They're also produced by microbes, and some of them get into the circulation. We still do not understand the full implications of that.
They're even wired into our central nervous system, so things like moods and behaviors can be dictated by the microbes in your gut. So they're doing so much more than helping us with digestion. They're really wired into all aspects of our physiology.
I mean, they're producing thousands of different molecules that interact with us as the host. I use this example of an orchestra. So the microbiota are just the players. All these different players with their mixture of genes can ultimately produce something, a song which is beneficial for us. Now, this design has several shortcomings that evolution did not anticipate. One is it's dependent on what we eat. What does our diet do to this system? The most dramatic change that we see today is actually what happened in the last 75 years since the end of World War II. Probably with the advent of industrial agriculture, chemical agriculture, ultra-processing of foods in a way that the microbes have never really seen before.
In our lab, we take stool samples from individuals and do DNA sequencing and identify what types of microbes, what species of bacteria are living within their gut. Often, it can be difficult to look at a person's microbiome and see that it is in the best possible state it can be in because we're just comparing different Americans. For a long time, we studied the microbiome of Americans and thought that's what a healthy microbiome looks like. And then we started looking at these populations that were not living industrial lifestyles. We have stool samples here in this -80 freezer from Tanzania or in Peru in South America, and those individuals live less of an industrialized lifestyle. So they're hunting and gathering, they're doing early forms of agriculture. We find that their microbiome actually looks quite different from that of the average American. They had a diverse, complex ecosystem. And we realized by studying the American microbiome, we were actually studying a plane crash after the fact. The American microbiome had deteriorated and we had lost species over time. And it wasn't until we were studying populations around the world that we understood, oh, this is what a normal microbiome or a normal airplane is supposed to look like.
In one of our recent studies, we've found out that the hunter-gatherer gut microbiome has around 750 different species of bacteria, whereas the Californian microbiome has only around 250 different species. So we have lost incredible biodiversity in our gut. If we look at transitional communities that live somewhere in between hunter-gatherers and industrialized, we see an intermediate number of species. And what appears to be true across many studies is that the more biodiversity you have in your gut, the healthier you are. Rainforests thrive on biodiversity, and our gut microbiome is the same.
When we look at the microbiome of your average American, it's a less diverse ecosystem, one that looks more like a clear-cut forest, a lot of species missing. A lot of the diseases that affect people that live this so-called Western lifestyle, we don't see those diseases so commonly in non-industrialized populations. And we think that at the heart of a lot of these are problems with people's microbiome.
We're exposed to more chemicals and drugs than any other people that have ever lived.
We're eating more ultra-processed foods than ever before.
Part of the role of the gut microbiome is to train the immune system.
All chronic diseases of the Western world are associated with a microbiome that's gone off track. Once you have an ecosystem that's been decimated, there's new species cropping up that typically aren't associated with humans.
Fermentation took a back seat with the advent of widespread refrigeration. We've forgotten humanity's relationship with microbes.
The modern industrialized world is not our gut's best friend.
One of the really exciting things is that we know that we can change our microbiome.